challenges with cognitive function. How many people have a good brain? Oh, we're deciding on that. We'll just think about that for a while. I'm not sure. Well, do your brain a favor and discipline the way you do digital, because it's a great servant, a very poor master. Absent presence is growing in the business community today. CEOs that I talk to often talk to me about this. I've got 10 people in my boardroom. I've got 6 of them really there, really engaged, and the other 4 are tweeting under the desk. And a study in London 2 years ago discovered that 85% of people who do that in a boardroom are actually talking to someone else in the room. Which opens up all sorts of interesting questions, like why don't you just talk to one another? Shallow think. There's a lot of research now. It started in the United States about 5 years ago, but it's now global, suggesting that because we multi-screen so much, we're learning to think broad and shallow, but not narrow and deep. That is to say, we know a little bit about a lot, but we don't necessarily know a lot about a little. Can I suggest to you, if you are still a student tonight, specialize in something. Choose 1 or 2 things and just become a real expert in those, because at some time in the future, somebody's going to want to know about your specialty, and there'll be a leverage point for you. We have transactional relationships with machines now. My wife and I, she's not here tonight, because we've been married, we just celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary, and don't be so surprised. I mean, I'm not, how does he do it? The question is how she does it, that's the question. We formed a transactional relationship when we got married, because you see, my wife Davina remembers some things extremely well. I remember other things sort of moderately well, and together we get it right at least some of the time. That's a transactional relationship. We do that now with machines. We don't remember everything we learn on the internet. We rely on the machine to remember it. We put it in Pocket or Evernote or some other platform, and because some of that information doesn't make it into our long-term memory, it can produce no innovation. Because new ideas, ladies and gentlemen, are always born out of connections between old or existing ideas. That's the way the brain works. And because it doesn't get as far as long-term memory, it can't produce benefits in terms of innovation. And we have the challenge of social disinhibition. Any psychology students here tonight? Ah, straight up the hand goes. Proud of it. Good on you. Psychologists call this social disinhibition. I love psychologists because they have great words for things. Social disinhibition is essentially the idea that people will do and say things online they would never say or do offline. And so 2% of 2,000 British people last year in a survey said, I have insulted someone I didn't know in the last year online. Now, 2% of 2,000 doesn't sound like much, but if you extrapolate that across the whole population of Britain, it means that 2 million British people have been insulted in the last year by 2 million other people they don't even know. That's a lot of insults flying around. And these are just some of the many things we could talk about that are challenges with the digital. One of them is time starvation. Do you know that 20% of office workers in the United Kingdom answer 50 emails a day from their colleagues alone? Not their clients, not their procurement partners, not their alliance partners, their colleagues in the same building, essentially. Our brains need downtime. They need time to be able to digest and assimilate what we are learning and experiencing. And if they don't get that time, we are less productive. And this is costing American business between $31 and $40 billion a year in terms of lost productivity. The second great revolution that is going to shape the Netherlands and Europe is the Robolution, the automation revolution. 15 years ago, Sony couldn't get a robot to walk. Now they can run and walk and play football and even greet presidents at trade shows in Japan. If you go to a mobile phone store in Tokyo, the first, quote, being you encounter will be an emote bot, a machine that has been programmed using software designed at Cambridge University to read your facial expressions, gauge your emotions, and respond in kind. 1,000 aged care homes in Japan now use these bots to deal with aged care clients. And in a recent survey, 85% of the aged care clients said, I actually prefer the robot carer to the human variety. This is the robotics revolution. And of course, it is the foundation of what we call Industry 4. Are you familiar with that term? Industry 4, which is essentially the death of old school factories where everything is done under one roof. It's the introduction of small production units, all doing one part of the production chain, spread over a large area, connected via the cloud, and run by machines that are self-repairing and self-programming. It has been said, only half-jokingly, that in the office of the factory of the next 5 years, there'll be one man and one dog. And the man's job will be to feed the dog, and the dog's job will be to make sure the man doesn't touch any of the machinery. Because these things will run themselves. That's the basis of Industry 4. You say that's sci-fi, that'll never happen. Well, Wi-Fi was sci-fi 10 years ago. And already we're seeing NVIDIA last year, its first driverless car. You say, big deal. Google's got one, Amazon's got one, everybody's got a driverless car. But this one was different because it didn't need a software programmer to teach it how to drive. It learned to drive by watching a human being drive. This is what technologists call deep learning. You may be familiar with the term machine learning. Essentially, because computers can crunch all that data today, they're able to spot anomalies and patterns in the data. By doing that, they can improve on their own programming. They are, in a rudimentary sense, learning. But deep learning is a whole different ballgame. And the reason it's called deep learning, I might add, and technologists often are quite open about this, it's because they don't understand how it happens. They just know that it does, and they have great hopes that it will help us cure major diseases, for example. In education, this automation revolution will give us what I call Education 4.0. Any teachers or educators here? Thank you, sir. Right at the front. Guy with a scarf, thank you. Hello, nice to see you. How am I doing so far, all right? Not sure? Okay, all right. She doesn't want to say because she's very kind. We're going to have virtual learning very soon. Already in America, we have virtual Einstein. This is a robotic machine anthropomorphized, built to look like Einstein, but it is programmed with software based on the work of technologists who read through all of Einstein's lectures, read through all of his writings, and have programmed the machine to give Einstein-like responses to questions about life, but particularly physics. This is virtual learning, and it will be much more widespread over the next few years. So will remote learning. Students in one place, obviously, teachers in a very different place. Do you know that by 2025, 2/3 of all American tertiary students will do most of their education online? It's already 10% in China. Students in America now, in many colleges, not all, are being asked to stay away from lectures. Don't come to the lectures. How many think that sounds good? 5 honest people. Sounds good to me. Don't come to the lectures. Watch them on Vimeo or YouTube. You come in for the tutorial. That's the only time we want to see you. This is not going to be unusual in 5 to 10 years' time. One of the challenges with robotization is obviously the challenge of human autonomy in an age of machine automation. How do we humanize the digital? How do we humanize the robotic world? 230 million industrial jobs globally will be automated over the next 20 years. 35% of all jobs in the UK will be automated in the next 20 years. 40% of all jobs in Australia, where I was recently, will be automated in the next 20 years. And it's not just low-end jobs anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Most of you are training for professions. It's not just the blue-collar work, we used to call it, the lower-end manual labor that will be replaced by robots. Professions will too. A young man that I have contact with on email and social media is called Joshua Browder. He's 20 years of age. He lives in London. That's his mother there. She's very proud of him, as you can tell. He invented the world's first robotic lawyer. It's called Do Not Pay. It's a chatbot. You'll go online and you'll answer questions, and it feels like you're talking to a human being when you're typing these things in. It asks you a series of questions. It represents you in law to help you escape parking fines. How many in Amsterdam like the sound of that? So in the UK and in the USA today, this thing is saving people many thousands of pounds and dollars in parking fines by representing them in the way a lawyer would. Now Joshua is working on the next iteration of that, and it was featured in the Wall Street Journal this week, in getting to the point where divorces can be handled by a purely robotic lawyer. How many journalists are here? Any trainee journalists? Hi, Zoe. I like journalists. I spend a lot of time with journalists. How did I know her name? I did. There are magazines like The Economist and Forbes now that are using Quill, which is a writing program, to construct entire articles from scratch for their publications. They don't do it with all articles. But what I'm saying is that the potential is there for even professionals. Medicine, no, you won't be able to book a surgeon to do surgery through an app. You can't do that. But you might be able to get a nurse to do basic level stuff using what we call Skillshare, where the nurse is telling you online, you need to do this and you need to do that. So autonomy is a challenge. So is surveillance. Now I know that you're supposed to, many of you, belong to a generation that doesn't care about privacy, but I know that's not true. The Samsung television people know that too, which is why last year they issued a warning to all people who use a Samsung smart TV. Did you see this? It was a worldwide cautionary note they sent out saying, we need you to be aware of something. The voice recognition technology that is in our televisions, which allows you to give commands, is actually able to store entire conversations you have in the cloud. And we are concerned now that hackers are getting access to our clients' conversations. So, ladies and gentlemen, your television is watching you now. And George Orwell would have kind of liked that, I think. There's the challenge of biohacking. If we do, as right now the Swedish government is deciding whether they will encourage their citizenry to have an RFID, a radio frequency ID tag, as big as a grain of rice, inserted in their skin to use in place of what we in London call an Oyster card. There are businesses like Epicenter Workstation in Sweden that have been doing this for some time. You have the thing inserted, you can open the security doors at work, run the photocopy machine, even buy your lunch in the canteen. It sounds very sexy, but we have the challenge of biohacking. You know, I know, anyone who knows computers knows, any computerized device can, at least in theory, be hacked. I know they can track me using my phone and triangulation, but I'm not sure I want my body to be a hackable and trackable device. And there's the issue of chip theft, by the way. I can steal your cash without stealing your identity or doing you any damage. I don't have to be violent to steal your cash, but I do have to be violent to steal a chip inserted. So these are big questions to do with the automation processes.